Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about pretty privilege. Is it real? Does it exist? And to sum it up, yeah, pretty privilege exists. Great. That's it for this week's video. I'll see you guys all next week. Bye. I'm totally kidding. I wanted to break it down a little bit more because pretty privilege is, I guess, more nuanced than people might expect it to be. Obviously, for those who don't know the definition of pretty privilege, it's basically the privilege that comes with being physically attractive. You know, you might be thinking, what is defined as physically attractive? I guess anyone who is conventionally pretty, or conventionally handsome, conventionally attractive. So pretty privilege definitely is a thing that exists in the world. And if you have never experienced pretty privilege, I am sorry to say maybe you are not considered conventionally attractive or pretty enough to be a recipient.
I cannot believe the confidence with which I said the absolute wrong word. I meant recipient, not whatever the heck recipient is. Recipient. I meant recipient.
Of the privilege that comes from it. It's a harsh reality, but it is in fact the reality. Now, there are different types of privileges that could come from being physically attractive. For example, you might have nicer customer service. Maybe you get offered freebies. Maybe things get let off for you a little bit easier than maybe other people. You know, maybe you don't have to try as hard as other people. Like, for example, maybe you're in the line for a coffee and you order a muffin on the side and your muffin is free because the person behind the counter is like, it's all right, it's on the house. Or maybe your boss fires somebody else for being sloppily dressed, whereas they might as well put in the same effort as you do, but because you're conventionally attractive, it seems like you've put in more effort towards your look, whereas your counterpart gets fired for looking sloppy and messy. It's weird little things like that. So I wanted to talk about why exactly does pretty privilege exist and where does it all stem from? First of all, I'd like to excuse if you can hear the rain in the background. It is currently raining right now, but I'm really liking this overcast lighting. I think it's doing wonders for my skin. So I thought might as well film a video right now when it's rainy and overcast. Personally, I love rainy weather, but I know not a lot of people do. I love it. I think it's very soothing. I even like being outside of the house during the rain. Weird, I know, but I would rather rain over a super sunny day. Sunny days don't really sit well with me. So I wanted to break down why we as a society are subconsciously nicer to prettier people. And you might look back at maybe your interactions in the past with people. Maybe you have been nicer to prettier people subconsciously, or maybe you're like, nope, I've never done that, which would be untrue because I feel like everyone does that subconsciously. Why are we like this, right? You might be thinking, it's honestly because there have been studies done, and these studies say that we as a society perceive prettier / more physically attractive people to be more fertile, to be healthier, and to have better genes. So if you think about it on this grand scheme of like reproduction and repopulating and, you know, creating as many babies as we can, it would make sense that we would go with the most attractive person since they are considered, in our brains, they have the healthiest genes. And so because of that, it's in our nature to be a little bit more subconsciously nice / accommodating and a little bit more lenient, and we sway a bit more towards naturally prettier people. I mean, a good example to understand if you are pretty or not is to talk to either a kid or see how babies react to you. Because if babies tend to stare at you a lot, and I'm talking like a lot, that means that you are attractive. Babies only stare at things that they find appealing, not attractive, but appealing. And in that case, if you're a person being ogled at by a baby, because, you know, babies stare a lot. They stare a lot, and they have that unbroken, unwavering stare. So, you know, if they're staring at you a lot, or if they smile at you, or if you try to interact with them and they giggle, or things like that, that is probably a good sign that you are some level of attractive, because babies subconsciously are inbuilt with the same thing we as adults have, where they perceive a more appealing looking person as being a nicer, more friendly person. And I guess all of that boils down to something that is known as the halo effect. If you've never heard of the halo effect basically is when they have one good trait, they have all the good traits. Now, that's a little bit tricky to explain, but I'll get into it. So in this situation, we're talking about the one good trait being physical attractiveness. This person is handsome, beautiful, whatever, conventionally attractive. Now, because they are conventionally attractive, all their other traits and all their personality types and whatever they have automatically be seen as also good and attractive. And I guess the best way I can sum this up is by mentioning serial killers. I hate to do it, but it's true. If you look at people like Ted Bundy, why was Ted Bundy so infamous? It's because he was considered attractive. That he had groupies, he had fangirls who would come into the courtroom. There were people who would go on interviews saying that, they find Ted Bundy so attractive and that it doesn't matter if Ted Bundy did anything to them, they could change them, And it's this idea that because Ted Bundy was conventionally attractive, all of his horrendous crimes that he committed are somehow given a free pass because he couldn't actually do that. Now, could he? There are actually interviews of women saying that I don't think he's guilty because he just doesn't look like the type to murder people. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I guess another lesser known serial killer that was also very infamous, but I guess maybe he's not as well known as maybe Ted Bundy, was Richard Ramirez, where he was known as the Night Stalker, and he would go into people's houses and basically brutally murder women and, steal belongings, and not just murder women, but he would murder whoever was in the house at the time, steal their belongings and disappear. When he was also on trial in court, he also had fan clubs of women being like, my God, he's so attractive, he's so hot. He had women send letters and photographs and, all of these things to him while he was in jail because he was attractive. He was an attractive guy. And this is what I mean. Someone is deemed as attractive, then all of the sick, twisted things they have done somehow get given a free pass. Now, obviously, serial killers are a very extreme case of this situation, but you can just look at normal celebrities or even people maybe in your life that you deem as pretty. Are you immediately or more inclined to give them a free pass if something goes wrong just because they are pretty? Or do you think that just because they are pretty, they have an abundance of good qualities? I know I can relate to that. I have some friends that I find very pretty, and for that reason I'm like, oh well, she's so pretty and she's super nice and she gets along with everyone and everyone likes her and blah blah blah. I have definitely said that in the past. I know I have. I can't really say I'm off scot-free because I definitely have also been part, as the society side, I have also perpetrated pretty privilege. For sure I have, because it is so weirdly ingrained in us as humans. But see, the other thing I want to touch on is pretty privilege is very surface level, as all things beauty related to some extent. There are different beauty standards in different parts of the world. So someone who is maybe conventionally attractive here in Australia might not be in India, and someone who is conventionally attractive in India might not be in Africa or something else. It's hard to be conventionally attractive everywhere in the world because to some extent there will be standards that you do not fit into. So obviously, I guess the best way to do it is to not force yourself to fit into any standards. I know that is hard, especially if you are constantly surrounded by media that tells you need to look a certain way or that you need to do certain things to be prettier, or if you just do this, you will become prettier. I get it. It's hard. Obviously, I have also come under, lots of pressure with how I look, and I'm always like, oh my God, I wish I looked more like this, or I wish I had this hair or this type of body type. totally makes sense. It's hard to fit into every beauty standard there is in the world. In these situations, I feel like rather than beating yourself up because you're not pretty, you should probably have some level of confidence that it's okay. Looks and beauty trends and all of these things go in and out of fashion. They become a trend and then they're not a trend. The only thing that stays trendy is to be confident. Be confident in the way that you look, and then you might automatically be deemed as pretty, because a lot of times confidence and positive thinking does a lot of the heavy lifting. People who have always been pretty or who have always been deemed as attractive by their peers or by society, they have an element of positivity regarding their looks, because obviously they get fed it. They're like, oh my God, you're so beautiful. Oh, you're so handsome. Oh my God, you are literally the most beautiful thing ever. They get fed this. So in their brain, they're like, wow, yeah, I definitely am super pretty. So it kind of works like positive affirmation. So they just sort of get prettier and more confident. So I guess for us average folk, a little bit of positivity and confidence could also get us to that standpoint where we would then be deemed attractive. But yes, pretty privilege is relative, like I touched on, because of the beauty standards around the world. But I would want to touch on this from a more personal perspective. I don't really deem myself to be a super attractive woman. I neither deem myself to be a super unattractive woman. I feel like I'm just in the middle. I'm sort of average. Sometimes I feel pretty and sometimes I don't. And it's just it is what it is. I think I'm just somewhere in the middle. One of the ways that I have realized there are certain situations I feel pretty and other situations where I don't, or certain situations I get treated better and in other situations I don't. And these are situations where I hang out with certain groups of friends. Now, if I hang out with a group of friends that is majority white, I'm talking blonde, blue-eyed, or even like darker hair but lighter skin and lighter eyes, or anything. I'm just talking about a group of friends that is not the same ethnicity as me. When I hang around them, I tend to feel like I don't get any sort of prettiness / pretty privilege. I don't get noticed. I don't really stand out in that group. And I think that's because they are so much more conventionally attractive, or they fit Australia's beauty standard probably better than I do, that people tend to look at them more. I guess a good example of this would be like the film The Duff, where she has two attractive friends and she's considered the Duff, which is the designated ugly fat friend. I wouldn't call myself fat or ugly, but in these situations where I hang out with these group of friends who are white and I guess conventionally attractive, I do at times feel unattractive. And I do feel kind of like I'm clunking and badunking along with this group and sort of bringing down the whole group aesthetic. I have felt that way. Whereas sometimes if I hang out with people who are probably the same level of attractive as me, or kind of look a little bit like me, or, no one is crazy attractive or crazy unattractive, we're all just sort of even, right? I feel like in those situations, I also feel a little bit prettier. Maybe they also feel a little bit prettier. No one is inherently bringing the group down by being the ugly friend. It's very problematic, I know, and I hate that I have thought this and felt this way in the past, but it is a reality I have faced. And I think this is why subconsciously prettier people also tend to be friends with people who are pretty, because they have a certain social standing that they have to keep. So if you look at that, prettier people tend to gravitate towards other prettier people, and then they tend to be friends with each other. It's weird, but it's true. And it's a trope that is completely pulled out of proportion in film and media. But I like to think that not everything in film and media is fiction. A lot of it is based on real life archetypes, stereotypes, tropes, things that have existed in real life. And I think this one is one of them, where pretty people tend to be friends with other pretty people. And that way, when they hang out in a group, everyone is the same level of pretty. Now you might be thinking, not everyone puts this much thought and effort into their friends, and you might be right. You might be right, but you might also be wrong. I feel like some people may devote more time and attention to people they deem worth their time and attention. And maybe a lot of that worth is dependent on how they look. Sad reality, but I think that might be something that happens. Rather than just friendship groups and that circle, prettier people also have an advantage in the workplace. And by that I mean prettier people are more likely to get paid higher and have higher paying jobs. They tend to be more successful. They also are more likely to get hired. There was a study done where they presented a potential employer 2 contracts, and the 2 people, one was physically attractive and the other was not. It showed that employers were more likely to hire the physically attractive person rather than their unattractive counterpart. Now, I definitely agree. I definitely agree that physical appearance plays a lot in the workplace, and sometimes things that maybe wouldn't slide if you were unattractive get slid because you're pretty. Or, maybe you don't have to try as hard on your appearance in terms of the uniform or the dress code, and it tends to go more unnoticed. It also applies to employers because it is said that subordinates/employees tend to view their physically attractive bosses and managers to be more competent than their unattractive bosses and managers and employers. So it kind of works both ways. You're also more likely to get hired if you're pretty and be treated better by your bosses if you're pretty, but you're also more likely to be respected by your employees and the people who work under you if you are also pretty. They're more likely to see you as a competent boss with good managerial and leadership skills if you are conventionally attractive. And now this is where it plays into a bit of a double-edged sword, because you might be like, okay, so pretty privilege is amazing and pretty people have it so easy in the world, and that everything that pretty people have are all amazing. Now, there are obviously downsides because not everything is perfect. There are obviously downsides to everything. And in the case of pretty privilege, I guess the downsides would be things like sexual harassment, unwanted attention, constant catcalling, harassment, full stop. But catcalling, whistling, maybe you get lewd comments, maybe you get people trying to hit on you all the time. You maybe can't tell who's being genuine and who's not because people are usually after you for maybe the wrong things. And in the case of women, prettier women are actually deemed to be less intelligent than their unattractive counterparts. And this is because people think that pretty women are less intelligent. Weird, I know, but that's also a trope that is presented in movies like Legally Blonde, where she is a very feminine, very pretty girl who goes into Harvard Law School and becomes a lawyer, and people feel that she is out of place there. In places where a higher IQ is required, I'm talking big universities, big jobs where you make a lot of money, but it's very hard to get into. These sorts of jobs sometimes feel their attractive applicants have lower IQs and therefore are less intelligent than their unattractive counterparts. Weird, because they could put in the same amount of effort, but for the more attractive people, it gets seen as maybe they bought their way into their company, or their dad is probably the board of the university, or he probably paid, or he's the principal of the university, whatever. It gets seen more as that, whereas unattractive people who are in high standing positions gets viewed more as they put in hard work, they're intelligent, they basically did it through blood, sweat and tears, and they made it here through sheer determination and hard work, whereas pretty people are seen as reaching high standings by probably just being pretty and or having people who could help them, or by bribing people, or by, working their way up the top and not with hard work. Which is so interesting when you think about it, because you would think that people would be more subconsciously biased in a way to favor prettier people, but in this case, it's the opposite. We actually tend to favor people who are unattractive because we think they've worked harder. But there's a whole concept of ugly privilege that I'm not going to get into in this video, because then this video would be crazy long, and this video is about pretty privilege. But I'm thinking I will make a video all about ugly privilege. Maybe that will be my next video, I'm not sure, but there is definitely a video I want to make about ugly privilege, because it is something that also exists, and maybe you don't know about it, maybe it's less well known than pretty privilege, but it's a thing. And for those of you who have watched this whole video and still don't think pretty privilege exists, or you think I'm talking straight shit, that's okay. I feel like in these situations, you need to talk to people who have had some form of a glow up. And by that, I mean, maybe they have lost a significant amount of weight. Maybe they have, they have somehow physically changed and went from being deemed as unattractive by society / ugly to then being deemed as attractive. Go talk to them and ask them if their life or if their social interactions have changed whatsoever from the time they were deemed as ugly to now. Because I guarantee you, they will say people have been nicer, things have been easier, people are more likely to go out of their way to do things for them. And sure, you might also say, but that's just people being nice. No. If it was people just being nice, people would help everyone. But people don't help everyone. People help the people they want to help. And so because of that, a lot of times people help the people they find attractive. Wow. How many times did I say people in that one sentence / paragraph? That was a lot. Because you can think back to yourself as well. Do you help people just to help people? Or do you help them because you're like, oh my God, he's kind of cute, but he's struggling, I'm gonna go help him. Or vice versa, she's really attractive and she's really doesn't know where she's going. Maybe I'll ask her if she needs directions. I'm just saying, it's a thing. Anyways, if you have any other thoughts or points or things you want to add to this conversation, please be sure to comment them down below, because I love reading things like this, and I feel like pretty privilege is a conversation that I find so interesting, because it is a bit of a double-edged sword. But that being said, I feel like the benefits far outweigh the negatives on a day-to-day basis. But I'm not sure. I don't know if I've ever experienced as much pretty privilege as maybe other people have. Maybe I have to some extent. I don't know. So let me know if you've ever encountered pretty privilege as well in your life. Let me know in the comments down below. Or if you've never encountered it, do you believe it to be a thing that exists? Have you seen friends or family encounter it? Or, do you believe ugly privilege is a thing as well? I don't know. Let's just have a discussion in the comment section below. Let me know. I'd love to read all of that. I personally was like, oh, I'm making a video about pretty privilege. Let's put on zero makeup and wear my glasses. Because of course, in my perspective, I feel like I look better without glasses and with makeup on. So I was like, let's just not do both of those things while we discuss pretty privilege. So that's what I did. So, we're sitting here with no makeup on and glasses. So this is what I look like in my daily life. I've put in zero effort. I put on my earrings and changed my top out of my pajama top. But other than that, this is what it is. And I thought it would be so funny if I talked about pretty privilege whilst maybe not looking the prettiest I've ever looked. But anyways, that's it for this week's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to subscribe to my channel. And yeah, again, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But yeah, that's it for this week's video. I'll see you guys all next time. Bye.